1921. And at last, Charlie Tubbs found a new angle on the heat wave. Storm washes out seaside carnival. Holidaymakers drenched. On a local, Charlie said, it would have been a scoop. Narrow judging resumed in the marquee, but on a big national question of perspectives again, you see. But even though it was a quiet year for the press, other people were getting headlines. Take that story about the R-38, for instance. The R-38 was a new airship being built in Britain for the United States Navy. So many thousand yards of fabric, so many cubic feet of gas. Lot of good statistics to fill up with, Charlie said. There was an American crew standing by to fly her over to the States. Soon she was coming out of the hangar for test flights, looking most impressive. But then, just as they were getting all set for the Atlantic, she fell into the sea near Hull, with enough casualties to make even the most hard-hearted of editors play it up as a major disaster. So there was this crew with no airship to take home. Charlie thought it was a bit of an anticlimax. Then came Charlie's really big break. He was told one day he was off to the United States himself to cover, among other things, the big fight between Jack Dempsey and Carpentier. So he found himself on the same boat as that most popular of Frenchmen, doing his best to pick up what he could. Among the fellow passengers, Earl Beatty going over for the Washington Naval Conference, of which more later. Lady Asquith, always worth a line, and a picture. Off to New York, a far cry indeed from his days on the local rag. Fascinating place, America, Charlie said. You know, well, sort of big. They even had women cops controlling the traffic, he said. As well as anybody else who needed controlling, most formidable. Perspectives again. A heat wave in New York, too. Only there, when it's hot, he said, it's real hot. The president then, Harding, playing golf. Seems to be a must with presidents, golf. That was the year of the death of ex-President Wilson, the man who had hoped for so much from the peacemaking of 1919 and lived just long enough to see it achieve so little. The passing of an idealist. Meanwhile, at a small sanatorium, a rising politician is battling against an attack of infantile paralysis, the slow, painful, but stubborn recovery of a Roosevelt. The America of 1921 was the America of the great tycoons. Tycoons, the like of which you and I are hardly likely to see again. John D. Rockefeller in oil. Henry Ford in automobiles. And still alive and tinkering, the man who helped to make a lot of tycoons, Thomas Alva Edison. A visitor to the United States in unusual garb, Earl Haig being initiated into the tribe, feathers for a field marshal. Those were the last days of the life of a great singer in America, Enrico Caruso. The America of silent movies, with Fairbanks, Will Rogers, and Tom Mix. And impossible to omit the bathing bells of a certain Mr. Max Sennett. Ah, what appeal is here. In 1921, such charm not only sent him, it brought him back as well. But for Charlie, Tubbs, enough of such dalliance, back to work. The Washington Naval Conference of 1921 found him there in the press gallery. There, representatives of the sea powers of the world met together to try and decide who should have how many and what size pieces of offensive floating steelwork. Charlie dashed off a special Tubbs article. Is the battleship boomed? I beg pardon. Is the battleship doomed? He admitted that probably warships had still plenty of good usage in them. At least he hoped so, considering how much they cost. But from tests he heard about, it looked as though air power was going to give a new slant to warships. A slant to the bottom. But the editor was unimpressed. What you trying to do, Tubbs? Undermine the people's sense of security? So it was back to the big fight. Dempsey versus Carpentier. A classic, they say, in the boxing world. In that battle, it was Dempsey who conquered and kept his crown. Though, as a matter of fact, apart from his ignorance of boxing, Charlie can tell you very little about that fight. You see, it was like this. Somehow they got the tickets mixed up, and he was unlucky enough to get a seat at the back. So then, home to Britain, to continue the restless search for a story to make Tubbs a name in 1921. But so hard to come by. Well, why not try the unusual, the freak, the novel, the odd? Like that German rotor ship, for instance. Something to do with the wind. But did the wind drive the rotor or the rotor drive the wind? A question now purely historical. Then there were, what were they called? Helicopters. That was it. A kind of trying to fly upwards. Sort of horizontal windmills, as Charlie colourfully described them, though nobody understood a word of what he said.